Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2414. Today we're talking to a guy who's taken his passion and created a business around it. He's known as the Bugeye Guy. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm back in Branford, Connecticut with a very special returning guest by the name of David Silberkleit. David, welcome back to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
I'm ready. Thank you, Mark. Yes, very ready.
Well, good to have you back. Now, for listeners that are longtime listeners, you got to go all the way back 7 years to October 11th, 2017, when David was guest number 877. A lot has happened in his world since then, no doubt. He's become very busy in what he's doing, and I wanted him to come back and give us an update on how his business is going and what he's doing, and we're going to also talk about an opportunity for some of you listeners out there. He's looking for someone to help him in this business. But before we dive into a proper introduction and I talk about what you're doing, what's one little thing, and I didn't ask you this last time you were in the show, that most people don't know about you, David?
Oh, wow. There's probably a lot of things. I'm a proficient unicyclist. That's probably something most people wouldn't know about me.
Okay, now this is interesting. I don't think I've ridden a unicycle since high school, probably, when a friend had one. And once you kind of get it down, it's like, oh, this is pretty cool. But you're still doing it at your age, huh?
Yeah, well, as long as I'm not falling, that's the challenge, I think. But no, I'm a really avid cyclist. I commute to work on my bicycle all year, every day, rain or shine, and really important to me to be out there in the weather and in the air, and just that's my sort of ramp up and decompress routine, and also keeps me in reasonably good shape. So I'm very much into wheeled objects of all sorts, and pedal power is a big part of my life. So unicycling always has been as well.
That's
and
cool.
Once you have it, I don't think you lose it.
Well, good. I'm not sure if I want to get back on one now. Probably not a good idea for me. When this falling thing is not so good. I've got a good buddy who I used to race vintage cars with who's a neurosurgeon, and he keeps reminding me at this point, he's a little older than me. I think he's just surpassed 71 or something like that. But he goes, yeah, you don't want to fall down at this point in our life. He said, after about age 35, your brain actually starts to shrink in your head. And that's why head injuries, when you hit your head hard when you're older, are so bad, because your brain is like a marble in a balloon. It bounces all over the place. So, so don't hit your head. Wear a helmet. I'm sure you do on your bike. I used to ride bikes a lot. And they are a great way. I commute down the hallway now. So I wonder if my wife would let me ride a bicycle down the hallway. She might. Yeah. Maybe a unicycle. I could at least bang into the walls. There you go. I'll give that a try. That'd be a good video to put on YouTube. A lot of laughs. That'd be fun. Well, let me give you another introduction here. David Silberkleit is the CFO, and that stands for Chief Frogeye Officer. I love it. Of the Bugeyeguys, the world leader for Bugeye Sprite sales, restoration, and parts. And in 2022, he purchased the first production of Bugeye Sprite. Wow. A car he imported from Australia. David and his team have sold their 400th Bugeye Sprite, an amazing milestone when you consider that in 2007, he started this business from a tiny home garage. Today, Bugeyeguys is a team of 7 people in an 11,000 square foot restored Quonset Hut full of classic British cars and lots of Bugeye parts. David added the Bugeyeguys parts business in 2017 and has now shipped over 15,000 boxes of Bugeye bits. I love it, Bugeye bits, around the world. I get the impression of, that what's that kid's toy that they used to play with and you add all the legs and everything? What was that called? Cootie.
Okay.
Every one of the 400 Bugeyes built by David and his team have been unique and different, from completely stock to fire-breathing, plus a recent electronic version with Tesla batteries. Interesting. We're going to learn a lot more about what's been going on there at the Bugeyeguys, but first, a word from our sponsors, so please give them a little love, and we'll be right back. Years ago, when it was time to renew my collector car insurance policy, my carrier's rates went up. way up. But my usage was the same, and I never made a claim. I didn't even have a ticket. So what's with that? So I turned to American Collectors Insurance. Has your collector car insurance recently raised your rates for no good reason? Tired of paying an annual membership fee? Then it's time to look around and call American Collectors Insurance. I shopped around, I asked friends for recommendations, and found a winner that I can trust. And boy, I'm glad I did. I saved hundreds of dollars every year and slept better at night knowing my baby was properly insured. American Collectors Insurance have been protecting vehicles since 1976. They provided me with an agreed value insurance policy backed by their history of taking great care of their clients. What could be better than that? So give them a call and ask for a quote today. 866-ACI-YEAH. That's 866-224-9324. And protect the ones you love like I did with American Collectors Insurance. Classic car insurance designed by collectors for collectors. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. So, David, a lot's been going on there. You guys have been very busy. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about these cars and how this business has grown, why it's grown, why you think that more and more people are interested. And we'll touch on some of these specialty cars that you built, because I love the fact that they're all a little bit different, especially we get into an EV conversion, because I'm starting to hear more and more of that with people that are building classic cars. So, yeah, what's been going on, buddy? You've been busy.
Yeah, well, thanks. And thanks for having me today. You know, it's been, I listened to the interview you and I did now 7 years ago and was just reflecting on the kind of how 7 years of life has just gone by in a blink. And 7 years ago, when we talked, we had sold our 211th Bugeye, which I never could have imagined we would sell 50, let alone 100 or 211. And now this week we sold our 400th Bugeye.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So this has been something that I'm almost at a loss for words. Of course, I'll fill this podcast just fine.
Of course.
But I'm at a loss for words in my own brain, at least in terms of trying to comprehend what's just happened here since 2007 when we started, so roughly 16 years ago. I was just another car lover like all of your listeners with a real passion for one specific little niche of the car universe. You know, and I'd be at every Cars and Coffee kind of event, just like many of your listeners, in love with many, many different cars, you know, falling in love with one thing one weekend and something totally different the next weekend. But for me, I had a Bugeye. I bought my first Bugeye in like 1978. I still have that car. That's the car I call Gumby. It's a car that we radically restored when we sold our 200th Bugeye. And so, you know, I'll keep that car forever. But it's been a car that had just a kind of staying power that none of the other cars I ever owned actually had. And it also was a huge opportunity that was sort of unrealized in the world. Nobody was really the main advocate for that one little car. And so in 2007, we set out to experiment with, could it be possible to be a specialist for Bugeye Sprites? And now 400 cars later, here we are. And
yes, it can be.
Yeah, and it's incredible to me because a couple different things. You know, a Bugeye is not a 911, right? You can't go 100 miles. Well, you can go 100 miles an hour in them, and many people have raced Bugeyes. But a 911 has a lot more utility in the sense that, well, they have roofs and they are, you know, German engineering. The Bugeye was an $1,800 car when it was new. So it's not a surprise to me that if you look at the growth of 911 ownership and popularity since 1978, obviously that had a different kind of growth curve. And old British cars, Bugeyes, MGs, Triumph Spitfires, TR3s, whatever your choice, they've been on a very different plane. They don't have that same kind of insane following and insane appreciation that you see in something like the 911 marketplace. But that doesn't mean we haven't been able to carve out an amazing little business in an amazingly tiny niche in this world. I think one of the more humbling things to me about Bugeye World is that it all ended in 1960. Again, trying to use 911s as an example, the longevity of that brand is astonishing. Just the fact that there are so many iterations of 911s, that's one reason why the growth and popularity and the staying power and the value has just been so meteoric. So when you have a car like a Austin Healey Bugeye Sprite, you have a defunct brand, and you have the lower tiered version of that brand, right? This was sort of the kid's car that Donald Healey said, any bloke could put one in his shed, and it was very low price, and it was very kind of not crude, but it was very simplistic. And the big Healey is a much more sensual and elegant machine, the 3000s or 100s. So the Bugeye is not only a limited run car with a very tiny little footprint in automotive history in terms of numbers. It's only 50,000 strong, and maybe there are 5,000 or 10,000 left in the world. So we don't have a lot to work with. And on the other hand, we've had this very, very rich journey that is continuing to just be mind-blowing for all of us who come to work every day and do this. And I'm honored by the fact that right now I have 6 other people who show up every morning to kind of share this vision that I had and have, which is that we can be really masterful at making a magnificent automotive machine and experience in spite of the fact that we are working with something that's somewhat crude and simplistic. And fortunately for us, there are a number of things that have really helped us along the way. One is that the unibody construction of a Bugeye Sprite makes it a very, very stable and rigid platform. So sometimes they get a little rusty, but they still have so much integrity that they handle really well, they drive really nicely, they perform beautifully. And that's helped keep them alive. Some of the other, body-on-frame old British cars can be really rattly and torsionally, flexy, scuttle shake, all of these problems. But we don't have that with Bugeyes. They have wonderfully tight rack and pinion steering that rarely wears out because they're very lightly loaded, so it's not under a lot of stress. And so the structure, in spite of its simplicity, has been a very great structure for us to work with and to hang new and improved and upgraded and properly toleranced new parts on these cars. You can make them drive fantastically well. And so that has helped us. And the second thing that has helped us immensely is that I was just at the Audrain Concours with this #1 first production Bugeye that we'll talk more about. It's a massive achievement for us to be able to locate the #1 Bugeye, but also to restore it and get it on the field at Audrain. That's a separate discussion. But what I will say, from being at a national concours of that caliber, the number of people who have been touched in some way by this little car has really helped us do what we tried to do and continue to do, to get to 400 cars. When you consider that the Bugeye Sprite has in some way the overlap, and everybody, it's like at Audrain you have, let's say, 5,000 people were wandering around. It seems to me, as a very casual observer of that almost all 5,000 have a Bugeye story, that some are louder than others. Some of these guys who have these amazing vintage racing machines that were on the field, they started with a Bugeye, so maybe it's very integral to their journey. But then there's the guy who's showing this amazing Bentley, and he says, well, my mom had one of those when I was a kid. Or there's another guy who's got like this crazy Mercedes vintage car that's, like top shelf restoration. And he's saying, oh yeah, my sister's friend came home from the hospital on the back shelf of a Bugeye in a little basket in 1958. It's an interesting part of our world that these cars, even though they're not a high-level car per se, they still touch so many people.
Well, given that, I'm curious as to the type of people that hire you guys to build them a Bugeye. What is the range? Because typically we look at us baby boomers being the guys and gals that are interested in cars from the 50s, 60s, maybe the 70s, but kind of when it starts to wane off a little bit. You have the different millennials or Gen X's and Y's and things. But who are the people that come to you as a majority? Are they all over the place?
I wouldn't say they're all over the place, but the kind of Herbie personality of the car is yet another attribute that really has helped us break down some boundaries. So we routinely will get a call from, often they're women who think that they're really cute and they want to participate, but they have enough car gene in their blood, or they have car connections, so that it's not just like a fleeting kind of pursuit. So there are, plenty of people who have car culture in their world, and then the magnetism of the Bugeye smile is very useful for them to actually get entree into the classic car hobby. And that's been a nice and sometimes surprising but very wonderful part of our world as well. You ask a great question, because I often wonder, and even when we started this 17 years ago, I wondered, how long can this go on? How many people can there be out there who would have that kind of a connection or interest in something like this? Because it's a third car for most people, or an eighth car if it's a collector, right?
You're right.
In fact, the 400th Bugeye is going to a guy who has this amazing collection of cars. He wants his wife to drive it, or she wants to drive it. I haven't talked to her. I'm not sure who's leading that charge, but
I think we all know who's trying to coerce whom here. I've tried that same thing myself.
Yeah, well, we've all been there. But his stable includes, like 4-cam Carreras, wow. and just, amazing. He's raced he's done vintage racing for years. He's got, we talked about Singer in my discussion with him. He said, yeah, I had a Singer. I sold it. This is like,
wow.
These are A-level people in the world of collecting and car knowledge and awareness. There are a lot of those people out there. So he's one type of customer. Just to be clear, it's not always the third car for people. He's a guy with I think he said he has 25 cars at the moment. I would have loved to have gone to see his place, but he's not local. So, but that is another thing that's really just been so gratifying for us. I never expected that we could be a national or even global company. And probably 95% of the business we do is with people that we never get a chance to meet. Like Ed, the fellow I was just speaking about, he's based in Utah, and the car is going to go to Florida, and we won't meet in person, but we're able to work it all out with modern technology and a lot of FaceTime and other things as needed. But in this case, it's mainly conversation and reputation, and all of that helps accrue to our advantage, but it makes it available in a way that I would never have thought possible. To answer your question, though, a lot of our customers are baby boomers. That's certainly been probably the bulk of our customer base. Mm-hmm. But we've done so many different things with the cars that it allows us to reach all kinds of people in all sort of arenas in the car universe. I think it's another really great aspect. We've had a bunch of gift Bugeyes. My wife's turning 50. She told me that she hates my Cobra, but she's always said, I really just want a Bugeye. So,
nice.
Can you send me one? And we'll surprise her. So we get calls like that.
Put it in a little Tiffany box.
Right. One of my favorite stories was, and this is, like just reflecting on 400 sold. They've gone to so many different kinds of people. But I got a phone call from a woman one day. This has to be one of my favorite of the 400. She said, I want to buy my parents a Bugeye Sprite. And I said, okay, that's really sweet of you. What's the story? Why? And she said, well, I've been hearing about these cars all of my life. In fact, when I was younger, I'd always hear about how badly my dad wanted a Bugeye Sprite, and he never really told me why. And finally, I got him to confess to me that they were on their way to look at one for sale in 1965, or whatever, it was like a used one. And my mom went into labor with me.
Oh, my gosh.
On the way to go get the car. So instead of going to look at this car,
he got a daughter.
They had to adjust their plans accordingly. So the father said that they were very, very happy that instead of the car they got her, But she always felt that once she attained a particular level in her career, in her life, and her finances, that she wanted to give them what they weren't able to get.
Wow, that's tremendous.
And so that was, those are the special moments where the emotion of a car, and again, all of your listeners and every car can elicit these kinds of emotional stories. It doesn't matter whether it's a Corvair or a Maserati, right? Everybody has these kinds of stories in every brand. But there's just so much personality in a little car that's always smiling with these cute little eyes staring at you.
Yeah.
And so it seems like we attract a lot of similar stories that are really just remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's made our business, in spite of the fact that we're ultimately trying to build product and make it work beautifully, the emotion and the human side of these stories is it's very much with us every day. The people who call us for parts, our parts customers, they have a lot of stories to share, and we hear these stories. I mean, these are guys who maybe didn't buy a car from us, but they have had their car for a long time. The relationships are deep and strong, and they love to share. So, that's another huge part of what we do is we hear stories all day long, and it's very gratifying.
Very fun. Well, part of all this success, no doubt there comes a challenge. And you and I had a little chat before, and I wanted to touch on this. I want you to share your current challenge, and that is finding people to work with you and your team. I hear this over and over again, so talk about that a little bit.
Well, we started as just myself and Russ the mechanic in my home garage. It's a tandem garage, so we had cars fore and aft with, walls all around. It was the most impractical and difficult place to work, and it's a narrow garage, and even the narrow Frogeyes barely fit in the thing. So, now we've grown to this big Quonset Hut, and it's roughly 11,000 square feet of space. We roughly have 38 cars in that building at any one time, and they're in all states of modification and repair and disrepair. And we have a team of 7, but we'd really like to expand. We need new technicians. We need new leadership. I mean, the managerial requirement to administer these kinds of jobs, I'm sure anybody who's in the restoration industry who's listening can relate. It seems like it's getting harder and harder almost with each passing month. I think COVID, the first round of COVID, I think wiped out a number of cottage industries that many of us were depending on for parts. Of course, that we don't have large vendors making various components for Bugeyes and other similar cars. So we have to depend on very skilled craftspeople who are smaller shops, and all of them are struggling with inflationary pressures and COVID-type pressures, and there were supply chain pressures. All of these things, parts quality has been another big issue. Every part that we buy, not every part, many of the parts that we buy, we have to machine them, modify them, enlarge them, reduce them, grind them, whatever it is, before they can be installed on the car. We always dream that we can just take things out of the box and bolt it into place, but it's more often than not you have to be a wizard to be able to get from A to B to C and actually have it all hold together. So we need a particular kind of person, and that's a special person. I mean, I'm grateful for the people that have worked with us and continue to work for and with us because it's not an easy task. It takes a lot of patience to put these things together. In the digital age, obviously we have different tolerance. We're in the Amazon age and we want things overnight, and yet in my industry, it's not much happens overnight anymore. Yeah. It's really difficult to deliver things quickly. I think the other thing that's really fascinating is that to deliver things quickly and to a very, very high standard, the Amazonification, if that's a word, is kind of commoditizing everything. Everything it's just disposable. If that vendor doesn't have it, I'll click on the other vendor who does. But for classic car restoration, that rarely works and can often get you into big trouble. So we need people who are really good at solving problems, whether it's finding parts or getting parts to fit or, dealing with the challenges that arise. And, every car that we build is like a sculpture. Every one of those sculptures has a long story. I drove a car today that's had 100 improvements, and it was a really nice car when we started. But out of those 100 improvements, I have to make sure, because my name is on this car, that all 100 sort of sing in harmony, and they don't always do that. For example, I had to get the steering wheel straight, so we're adjusting the toe in to make sure that the car goes down the road and the steering wheel is centered at 12 o'clock. Now, these are small details, or that is an example of the small details that we really obsess about, because I think that when you want to try to sell 400 of anything, they really have to be well done, especially something as complicated as an old car.
Yeah.
So we need people all the time. I love to talk to anybody and everybody who can help with a piece of this puzzle that is really our daily routine and our lives. I have to laugh because my wife often reminds me, she I said, oh my gosh, we have so many broken things. And she'll say to me, well, you're in the business of fixing broken things. That's good.
Yeah, that's a good. Well, if somebody out there is listening right now and getting excited by this, how can they reach out to you? What's the best way for them to find you? And I'll also put this link on your show notes page at the Cars Yeah website.
Well, thank you. Yeah, anybody can email me at any time, and just the Bugeyeguys website has all of our contact info and a lot of good stories, and a lot of good tech info, and just a lot of good background information about our journey. So the best place to go really is our web page and our Instagram feed. I have the Bugeye Guy on Instagram, and if you want to see a massive photo montage of all the crazy things that we've done, ranging from custom parts that we've made and kind of custom applications and fabric work. The electric projects have been another massive endeavor for us. We built 3 electric conversions.
Wow.
Our third one that we are working on now and just about finished is Tesla powered. Mm-hmm. So we need people who understand that revolution. Someone emailed me recently and said, now that your main focus is electric. That's not at all the case.
Yeah.
Because it isn't. Out of 400 sold, we've done 3 that are electric. So, that's less than 1%. But it's probably taken a massive amount of energy burn, like brain energy in terms of learning, understanding, trying to package. It's not doing Scouts or Suburbans with electric power or whatever, Jeeps or FJ40s. It's a much smarter way to go because they have a lot more room and a lot more open space. We had to put on this Tesla-powered car 2 Tesla bricks in the trunk, and you don't have a trunk lid on a Bugeye Sprite, so you got to slide it in behind the seat. Yeah, so we had to make it all module.
Yeah, I was going to say I should connect you. Are you familiar, or have you ever met David Bernardo from Z Electric?
I have not. No, I don't know him.
You should meet him. He was a guest on the show as well, and he's in San Diego, and what he started with was changing over VW buses and Bugs from the 50s and 60s, even 70s, to electric. And he's been doing it now for a long time. Perhaps you guys should talk and collaborate. He's a super nice guy, and he's also expanded into Carmagillas and done some Porsches. Yeah, so that's what he does. That's his entire business, is changing old cars into electric. So it's a fascinating thing. And speaking of old cars, I want to get back to this car number AN5L 501, if I'm using the right ones, you found in Australia, the very first Bugeye Sprite. How on earth did you come across that?
So the very first production Bugeye Sprite was car number 501, or AN5L 501. There were some pre-production prototypes, but the first car credited as the first production Bugeye was 501. And what's really interesting about the 501 story, not so much about the car, was the way that it kind of interacts and overlaps with our journey as Bugeyeguys, the company. Because in 2012, when we were, I don't even know if we'd sold our 100th Bugeye at that point, but we were sort of still just getting our feet wet in this whole industry, I was offered this wreck of a car. I was buying a lot of cars at that point. I mean, again, remember, we sold 400 Bugeyes. I purchased probably 500.
Yeah, sure.
So,
bits and pieces.
Yeah, and so I'm always buying and always selling these cars, and lots of old classic cars as well, so I'm kind of constantly looking and buying things. But I was offered this wreck of a Bugeye in the wrong color for what I knew from what I had read about the very first production car. It had wire wheels, which I knew were not correct. It had been raced. It had a roll bar. It just didn't look anything like a car of any value, which, of course, for people who are into cars with provenance that get restored and found in fields often come this way. So
sure.
It perhaps it had all the right earmarks of being a special car. But to me, being more of a novice in my journey of doing this, everything didn't look right to me. And as I looked deeper at the pictures, I knew there were certain distinct features that were on the earliest Bugeyes. Because remember, this was, it's hard to even imagine how they made 50,000 cars with the technology they had. That they could make 18,000 cars a year for 3 years is mind-blowing to me. And so for the first few thousand cars out of the 50,000, there were some errors and mistakes and things that they modified and made running production changes, and some distinct characteristics that have been documented for all the early cars. So, maybe somebody who had car number 300, or, not 501 was number 1, but maybe they had number 801, right, the 300th car. And they were able to document those features. So there were some known things that one would be looking for on 501, the first one. And it was very hard for me to verify from the information that was available. So I passed on the car. And I didn't buy it, and somebody outbid me. I just wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't know enough to be comfortable with it. He outbid me, and it went to Australia. And it was a guy actually very similar to myself who was focusing on Bugeye Sprites, a guy named Tony Bonetto. Maybe some of the listeners even know him because he was pretty active in collecting old British car parts. He'd come to Carlisle in America regularly, and it was, was known to a lot of people into this, the clubs and the people who were into this brand. Anyway, Tony sadly passed away in an accident, and a diving accident, and he left a car that was not quite complete and had been restored in his vision of what he wanted number 1 to be. And I was lucky enough to buy it from his widow and just to get a second chance to buy it in 2022. So now 10 years later, I had now sold hundreds of Bugeyes and now seen so many of these. Because remember, in the restoration, even though we've sold 400, we probably restored another 400. I don't know. We've just handled many, many of these cars. So we're very familiar with their nuances. So now in 2022, when I was offered this car, I could actually look at it with such different eyes than I had had 10 years prior. And it was very gratifying to me. I had become expert enough to really appreciate and know for certain that this really is the very first production car.
Wow.
And it was very satisfying for me to kind of go through that arc and arrive at that moment and to be able to purchase it. Then I had to, now we go back to the kind of chaos and crazy daily routine. It's like, great, you're now the proud owner of the very first production Bugeye Sprite, but it's in Melbourne, Australia. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Now figure out how to get it here.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, it's, there's a great place on your website, and I'm going to put a link on your show notes page where you tell the story and pictures the beautiful little thing. I guess it was just meant to be because it tried to come into your garage once and you passed and it sat there and went somewhere else, but it kept thinking about you, David, and it eventually got back to you. So it makes for a spectacular story. I think it's great. And I also want to, say congratulations on taking that car to Greenwich and then also Audrain's event as well, right? The one that Audrain just had?
Yes. Well, thank you. And it's great. I mean, it's all part of the feeling very satisfied of this loop of the whole journey on for us and also the journey for that particular car. Because, so now what's really also interesting about the story, buying it and the arc of learning that I would buy it and understood it is only part of the story, because now, flashback, if you will. So now think back, if you will, to, I guess it was roughly December of 2021. We're in the depths of the sort of post or mid-pandemic supply chain nightmare.
Yeah.
And I call up XYZ shippers, specialists in shipping cars from Australia to America. And they basically tell me, okay, yeah, we can ship your car from Australia to, New Jersey. So I needed an East Coast port in the New York area. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're not far from that zone. And they said, yeah, we should be able to get you a ship sometime by June. Mm. And I just, I said, excuse me?
Yeah.
You do this every day, right? I mean, really, I have to wait 7 months? I just bought the number one Bugeye. This is important. Can we charter a ship? I said, I actually asked them, can we fly it? Is it possible to do air freight? And the answer unanimously from all these vendors that I ended up meeting and learning to find was that because of the supply chain issues, all of the shipping was focused so aggressively on Asia that there really weren't boats going to Melbourne that would be coming to America. It just was a very low order, low demand. The triage of shipping pretty much wiped out the Bugeye transport business.
What about the flying though? Because I sold I had a 1960 Lotus Formula Junior race car that I used to race. And I ended up selling it to a guy named Mark Green, with an E on the end of green, believe it or not, in England. And I drove it down to the airport, or didn't drive the car, but I trailered it down. And they put it in the belly of a British Airways jet, and he had it the next day. So
that is great. That's a great story. Well, I looked into all of those options, and they kept telling me the same thing. It's even worse if you want to fly it.
Oh, just too much stuff.
Too much stuff, and Melbourne to New York was not available, and they were all having trouble. Like the brokers were all telling me they can't even get a ship date. It was a long, dramatic thing, and again.
Yeah. Well, remember all those ships that were stuck because that one guy tried to do a U-turn in I think it was the Suez Canal or something like that?
Yes. He ran aground.
And it just backed up. Yeah. Well, it was a terrible time, but I'm so glad that you got it and so happy that you have it. And again, I'll put a link to that story. I always like to ask about books. Is there a kind of definitive or great book on Bugeye Sprites you could recommend for people that want to learn more about these cars?
Oh, boy. There are a bunch of books that we use as reference tools occasionally. Mm-hmm. I think more and more the digital reference is sort of eclipsing that for a car like a Bugeye. There is a book called Original Austin Healey Sprite by a guy named Terry Horler, who put together a really great resource and a great reference book, and that has production numbers and color. There were only like 5 or 6 colors that were available. It's all listed in that book. So that's probably the book to get, Original Austin Healey Sprite.
Okay, cool. We'll put it in there. Well, this has been really fun catching up with you, and I'm so proud of what you've done, and amazing, because they always say when you're starting a business, niche down until it hurts. And a lot of people want to be generalists, and they think there's going to be so much more work, but you've done exactly what many people recommended. I was recommended the same thing when I had this idea to start a podcast. Niche down, and niche down to an area that you're passionate about. For me, it's cars, of course. So I think it's wonderful what you've created, and I'm so happy and proud of what you've done, you and your team. And again, listeners, opportunities here. If you love to work in the old car world, here's an opportunity. You say there's no jobs out there? Wrong. There's lots of jobs out there. You just got to go find them. I wondered if you could leave us with some parting words of wisdom for people out there that would love to be successful and start something in their field of passion like you have.
Wow. I wish I could do that with complete clarity and accuracy every time. That's a tough order. I think that it takes, if someone was to ask me, like, what's the secret to our success? So maybe that will help lead me to some kind of an answer that will be helpful for anybody who's interested in that question. I think that ultimately for us, it's taken a lot of focus on a need that we did not see being served. And I think the other thing that's really been helpful for us has been to be unafraid to say yes. I think that a lot of times in the auto industry, perhaps in the male-dominated industry, perhaps in the industry of rights and wrongs and positionality, we all know best. We all know what we do right and what we do wrong and what is and isn't proper. For us, one of the greatest opportunities and gifts of our business has been to be flexible and to, I'll just tell you very quickly, we had someone call once and say, we want to put a Bugeye Sprite in the lobby of a condominium complex we're building in New Jersey. Can you help us? And I said, tell me more. And they said, well, we really want to attract the Instagram era for selfies, the Instagram crowd. We're after millennials. We want them to be able to take selfies in this great sculpture in the entryway to this condo complex. And can you build us one? And, most people would have said no. We said yes. We found a car in the bushes in Boston area that was rotting away. We restored it with no drivetrain and a beautiful interior. We painted it red, and it lives in this lobby. You can see it on our website. That's one of the 400 that we sold. It takes the ability to create a business that is based on making a fantastic driving machine and also being willing to say yes to a machine that will never drive. It's entombed in a building. And it was a wasted car. It would have just rusted away. It needed a lot of external restoration, but we didn't care about the structure of it because it wasn't ever going to drive. So this is, I would say, would be my success, quote, logic kind of statement is that if you're focused on a niche and you're able to be flexible and look to opportunities and have an open mind and say yes to things that come your way, you can pretty much do anything.
Well, I'll tell you a fun, quick story before I let you go today. A friend of mine, Henry Reisner, who had a business called Intermechanica, where they built copies, if you will, of old Porsche Speedsters, Roadsters, Klubelwagens, reproductions. It's a company his dad started back in the 50s. And
I know the company.
Okay,
yes,
yeah, great guy. And I've become friends with him. And I called him one day. I was working at a company called Griot's Garage, and we were designing a new corporate headquarters. And we came up with this idea, and I called Henry, and I said, Henry, I'm finally going to order a car from you. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And he said, well, first and foremost, knowing you probably wanted me to put a 911 engine in it. And I said, nope, I don't need an engine. And he said, what? And I said, yeah, I don't need an engine at all. And he said, electric power? Now, this was 15 years ago. And I said, nah, well, it needs to have some wiring. I want the headlights to work and the horn to work, but I only need half a car. And he's like, what? And I said, yeah, look in your email. I just sent you a sketch. Have you ever been to Cadillac Ranch in Texas where the Cadillacs are sticking out of the ground? I want you to build me a car where the nose is sticking out of the ground, and we're going to put it in front of our new retail store with the headlights pointing at the American flag. I want the horn to work so the guys inside the store can honk the horn if a kid starts to climb on the car. Can you make me something like that? And there was this long silence. And he goes, I think so. And anybody who's been to Griot's Garage in Tacoma will have seen that car. We planted it in front of the store, and there you go. So yeah, there's lots of unique opportunities there. But your story reminded me of that. I think it's great. I'm going to put links to all of David's contacts so you can reach out to him, find his website, his Instagram page, his Facebook page. He also has a parts business, as he mentioned, and his email, because anybody listening out there that wants to go work in a field that is so much fun, how can you not have fun around Bugeyes and these Bugeye guys? I mean, come on. So I'll make sure I put links on David's show notes page. David, hey, thank you for reconnecting with me, sharing your successes and how far you've come. Until you and I talk again, my friend, I'll see you, hopefully, down the road in a Bugeye.
Thanks so much, Mark.
This has been great fun. Today's vehicles are essentially computers on wheels, and it takes more than a wrench and oil to keep them humming. That's why Cars Yeah supports TechForce Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to driving tomorrow's workforce of skilled technicians forward. Techs keep our cars, trucks, airplanes, and fleets rolling. Yet there's a massive tech shortage because many young people don't know it's no longer a blue-collar job. Today, it's a new-collar career. It involves computers, technology, it's in high demand, you get paid really well, and you can live and work anywhere in the country. I know you're passionate about cars, trucks, and motorcycles, and you can help pass that passion on to the next generation of techs so our rides keep rolling down the road. Visit techforce.org today and learn how.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.